Hello, people. So, something you may not know about me is I've long had an interest in urban demographics, specifically urban demographics, but basically, every roughly 5 years, sometimes less, I've done a very comprehensive study on world population, particularly focusing on cities. Um, I just find it interesting. Now, this is not official. This is not something I've got published or done as official academic work, but I have put a lot of work into it, and it's something that I just find interesting. So I'll spend months actually, studying this, then with rough notes and typing up the results. I just find it interesting. Um, so the news that India has now officially surpassed China was, of course, of interest to me. It was scheduled at some point this year, but the UN has now made it official. And so there's a few things to say about this. It's not a major surprise. It was projected, um, although the date that they've given, April 2023, was a bit earlier that I think than expected. I think the feeling was it would be this summer or even towards the end of the year. Um, but this is not an exact science. It's not like at any one specific point. This is definitely the crossover. So they've sort of made the month of April 2023 a broad consensus, or not consensus, but a broad point in which they could say, okay, this is what we're designating as the crossover point. So I've just watched a UN press conference on the subject, and it was chaired rather. The answers were taken by, let me just get this right, John Wilmoth, who's the director of Population Division, UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, and Sarah Hertog, senior Population Affairs Officer, Population Division, um, DESA, on India overtaking China as the world's country. And there were journalists from both India and China, and one guy from Germany. Um, it wasn't a big packed press conference. It was fairly low key, but I think it's interesting. So there's a lot of factors that come into something like this. Of course, fertility rate. India is a bit higher than China. China's been stable for a long time now in terms of its population. Actually, both countries have an aging population, but China has been stabilized for a long time. Some may highlight the one-child policy as being a factor in that, and no doubt it played a role. But there was femicide of baby girls. Of course, that was the notorious controversial side of that. But they have relaxed the policy now, so Chinese couples can have two children, and I think even in some jurisdictions, three children. So they have relaxed that policy. An aging population, of course, brings in a whole other set of issues, pensions and the the shift in the labour force, all that sort of thing. Um, so officially, the populations are both around the 1.4 billion mark, but obviously India's now slightly surpassed China. It may be that by this century, at some point in this century, China may actually decline so much that it may actually go under a billion. India, by contrast, may keep growing to reach a high plateau of up to 1.6, 1.7 billion. Again, this is a loose projection. It's not for with any certainty, but unless India's population sort of stabilizes, it will keep growing. Now, this gets into a number of questions as to why the discrepancy or why the shift. Because if you look at a map, China's a lot bigger, even excluding those territories that China claims as its own, Taiwan, and special economic zones, Hong Kong and Macau. But even excluding Taiwan, China is a huge country. It's about three times as big as India, or almost three times as big. Over 9 million square kilometers to India's 3.5 million. India is a big country, but China is even bigger. Um, so that brings in issues about where is the population distributed. If we look at China, very big clusters in the northeast, that's around Beijing and Tianjin, that sort of northeast pocket. The far east, that's Shanghai and the other big cities around Shanghai, and the south, that's Guangdong province and so on. Of course, there'll be other pockets like in um, the central regions of Hubei. Wuhan's a big city. Then we look at Western China, Xinjiang, Tibet, Qinghai. Now, the de facto situation is they are part of the People's Republic of China, so we can get into the politics of that, but that's just the reality at the moment. Now, they are very, very sparsely populated. I think Xinjiang has about 20 million people, Tibet about 3 million, somewhere around that mark, but they're vast regions, they're bigger than many countries in the world. When you look at that, China's population is far from evenly distributed. India, not evenly distributed. There's more people in the north than the south, but there isn't quite as extreme a contrast. In India, for example, Rajasthan, a big part of Rajasthan is desert, but northern India, particularly Uttar Pradesh, has very populous states. Actually, Uttar Pradesh, I think I'm right in saying it's the world's most populous subnational entity. Um, it's it's at the very top. I think Guangdong may be second, unless I'm mistaken. That is to say, uh, regions, states, provinces that are not independent, but they're part of a bigger country. England actually is one of the biggest in Europe in terms of a subnational. I think it is actually the biggest in Europe, most populous in Europe as a subnational region, nation in the case of England. But there is another factor in terms of how cities are allocated now. A very striking thing, and I don't think many people realize this, but I've studied this subject. India has significantly less major cities. What I mean by that is, yes, it has some mega cities, Mumbai, Delhi, Kolkata, Bangalore, formerly Bangalore, but less than China. China has at least 120 cities with 1 million or more people. In India, that figure is just about 60. So that gets into questions. Well, if China has far more big cities, how come it has now a similar or smaller population? Well, this may be because, and this is just my guess, I honestly don't know, but maybe that India has a much bigger rural population, or put simply, India has far more villages than China. So, although China has more big cities, India has more people living in rural areas. So there's probably hundreds of thousands of little hamlets and villages, whereas in China, maybe not so many. Having been to China twice, I've not been to India. I've been in some pretty small settlements in China. But they're very remote. Whereas in India, they tend to be scattered quite close together. In China, you need to go some distance to find a very, very small village. I was driving for 4 hours. We got to this little mountain hamlet, maybe 500 people. Um, I was a good 4 hours from the sort of city that I was in, which was not a major city. In India, it may be that there are just more villages. So when you add them up, that's going to be a bigger population. I don't know. I'm just guessing. It may be that factor. Um, but regardless, even if it's not precise, and it hasn't technically taken over China yet, it's this year, and I think it's may as well say that's what happened. Um, Looking at other countries, it goes without saying that this is going to pose a lot of challenges for India, challenges it's already facing, and that's why I think it's critical that harmony is part of that. I mean, I don't want to sound sort of poetic about it, but I do think that India could potentially be in a bad way if, for example, there's growing resentment, if there's tension between different communities, that could potentially be a growing problem. And there is signs of, this reactionary right-wing nationalism that's developing in India. There is possibility that tensions could grow. Um, India may introduce some sort of population control method. I don't know. I very much doubt they'll introduce a one child policy because they would see that as being associated with communist China. I can't see them doing that. But who knows? Who knows what could happen? It could be um, that there is also a changing shift in the middle class. It could be there's a lot of components involved in this, a lot of components. But regardless, it actually poses challenges for both countries in different ways. Now, beyond India and China, a distant third place is currently the United States, about 335 million. But this century, perhaps somewhere around 2050, 2060, Nigeria is scheduled to surpass the United States as the world's third most populous country. Nigeria is currently probably over 200 million. It's often difficult to be sure about developing countries because the census is so inaccurate or out of date. And Nigeria is notorious for this, for having an up to date census. Um, if we look at the city of Lagos, for example, it's a mega city, but its population has been scheduled or projected anywhere from 11 million to 20 million. So take your pick. And that's true of the country more broadly. Um, there's countries that are in the top 10 currently: Indonesia, Brazil, Pakistan, um, Mexico, Russia, Bangladesh, the Philippines, and Ethiopia. They're all in the top 10, all over 100 million. But I think in coming years, we're going to see countries like Egypt and Vietnam surpass that. Then we get to countries like Turkey and Iran, currently around the 80, 85 million mark. They may surpass that. In Europe, Germany may slightly decline. It's currently Europe's most populous country. The UK may actually overtake Germany this century. We may surpass 70 million. Germany may go down to 70 million. Um, so these are all important questions that will be asked about how individual countries are dealing with their population issues. And it does differ greatly between developed countries and developing countries in terms of fertility rates, in terms of how migration plays a role, and so on. Another country that's going to surpass 100 million, I reckon, is the Democratic Republic of Congo, which again is interesting because most of it is jungle. It's Kinshasa and some other major cities, but the thing about African states is they have very, very big youth populations. You know, some of those countries, over half the population is under the age of 25. So I think we're going to see a big explosion in countries like Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, and DRC. They're going to really rocket up this century. As for the world, as we know, it hit 8 billion at the end of 2022, probably hit 9 billion. It's going to slow slightly now. It had been a billion people every 12 years. I think it's going to slow a little bit, 15 years, but that's still an incredible, incredible growth rate when you look at the pre-industrial world where, it took thousands of years to hit 1 billion, and then about 100 years to get to 2 billion, and it's just keeps growing fast. So I think that the world population may peak around 10 or 11 billion and start to go down. That would be my guess. Anyway, it's an interesting subject. If you're Indian or Chinese, do let me know your thoughts. I'm just interested in the subject. I don't intend anything here to be disrespectful. Um, Let me know your thoughts.